Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the hockey and baseball entries for the GameDay family, which are power play and extra bases. Now, I've already done a whole video on the Tallboy, so if you really want to get into the Tallboy card family and understand what Tallboys are, I definitely advise that you check that video out. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but not much, so that this video kind of flows better into just talking about the cards. But in essence, in the 1960s, Topps decided to release a different size card. It's a standard size card, but it's a little bit taller, about a third again as tall. And they launched it in 1964-65 with their hockey set, and they followed it up immediately with their football set in 1965. And these cards, they use the exact same design. They are very bold and they're pretty cool, but they didn't have the ability to get a second run, and they were never even used in baseball. They basically got shelved, and then a few years later they were brought back for Topps' second run at basketball cards. They did it for 2 years, and then it disappeared, and Topps never used it, with only one exception, which doesn't matter here. But the Tallboys became kind of this mythical card from the past that people would run into all the time, primarily because of the really, really good rookies that you would find. But other than that, it basically disappeared for 20 years, and it wasn't until NFL Properties dusted it back off in 1992 and started a set called GameDay. And GameDay it took the exact same proportions of the classic cards, but it used a modern card style. And it did a nod to the past in part because it used a black and white background behind a color image of the player. It was a really cool idea. Unfortunately, it just didn't grab hold. It didn't make the impact that they needed. And so Fleer adopted the cards. They took it over, used almost the exact same card design, slight differences on the front. On the back, there was a wild difference, but on the front, the big advantage that they added was a color fade. And that kind of enlivened the cards, and it made it really interesting as you were going card by card by card, because now the cards were all changing as you were going from team to team. So that was the big advantage that they made, and it really helped the cards. But also Fleer, boy, they marketed the crap out of these cards, which is a good thing. It was a lot of fun, and so it made the set kind of a mainstay for card collecting in football. But Fleer wanted to take advantage of this new card that they were using and spread it out across all four sports. And the first place that they turned, appropriately, was hockey. And very much I don't know if it's in a nod or if it just happened to be this way, but in the same way that in the 1960s, they used the same card design from hockey for football. Well, here in 1993, they used the exact same design from football for their hockey cards. And exact, I mean all the way down to basically every single element except for the logo for the sport. So these cards were really great. The way that they came out, it was already pretty well in place. The one difference they made was that the black and white background on the football cards was not used in the hockey. So the hockey had a full color background, and I think it would have been a lot better had they used the black and white background. I'd love to have seen what it would have looked like, but they went with a full color image, which that's the only limitation. But otherwise, these cards look great. And for the hockey set, they decided to change the name away from GameDay. So instead of GameDay, they went with the name of Power Play. And this would be something that would be very distinctive about all of the different family members across the different sports. So you had Power Play, Jam Session, and Extra Bases. So that was the first distinction that they made. And there weren't a lot of other distinctions that were made between the two sets. The card design is very basic. It's a simple border around the outside, some text down at the bottom. There's a fade from white down to a color at the bottom. They have a couple of different colors. Not many in this sport, unfortunately. They only chose a small handful, which kind of limited how much variety you would see across the entire set. But still, it was good. On the card back, they had really good blocking of the different elements with a huge space for an image. They really wanted to take advantage of this vertical space that they had for all these images. And the card back was really built around that, but it had plenty of room for all the things that you needed. And there were two ways in which this set departed from all of the other GameDay family sets. The first way was the fact that it actually had a subset in it. Now, these are not repeats of players already in the set, so every player only has one card, but this is a subset of the Hockey Canada and the USA Hockey teams. So the way the card back works is it's really busy. It's really cool, but it's really busy. It has a flag on one side, and then it has an emblem of the country on the other. Bald eagle for the US, a maple leaf for Canada, and the back is great. problem is that the player basically gets sucked right in and kind of disappears from the card, which is, it's a little bit too bad. The card back itself is horizontal, very unusual for Tallboy cards, but it is horizontal, which is neat. Unfortunately, what they did with the card number was a big mess. So in the main set, the way that the card numbers worked was it was a big, almost comical number, and it was themed for the particular color of the team. Well, in this case, they just used a simple, very stick-like black number, and they put it over, for some reason, the image, which means that for a lot of these cards, you literally can't read the card. When I was putting together the set, I had to go through the checklist to figure out who went with what numbers that I was missing. So that was a big problem with these numbers. And for the most part, it doesn't really matter because there aren't very many stars in it. However, it does have a very important Paul Correa card in it, so there is that one card. But other than that, this whole set it's a really good set. And even though it has a lot of players in it, it has enough players spread out that it actually works really well. And the other way in which this was an unusual set was it had two series. So it had Series 1 for its veterans, Series 2 where it had a lot more of the prospects and the rookies, and it was pretty well balanced in terms of the players who were showing up uniquely in Series 2 versus Series 1. So overall, this was a really good set that they released. Now, because it was two series, Fleer loved to do inserts, and they were increasing the number of inserts that they were doing, and so because they had two series, they had a lot more room for inserts. In fact, with football, they had only done 3 inserts. Here they did 4 per series, so they did 8 different insert sets, which is almost 3 times as many inserts as they'd had in football, which made it a lot of fun, but it also meant that the 3 standard inserts that basically all the GameDay family sets had, they ran out of that in a hurry and they had to come up with different inserts, which is kind of fun to check these out. So as far as the inserts go, the first insert is the mainstay, Gamebreaker. And here they went with, it's not really a full bleed, but it's basically a big background that runs off on all sides of marble with a cutout of the player, and the player, because he's a cutout against this white or very light gray marble, he stands out really well. He's very clear in the image, and then you have the Gamebreaker text along the side, which is okay. But that's what they went with, and the player stands out, but the card is kind of boring as a result, which is unfortunate. On the card back, they went with basically the exact same card back that they'd used in football. But here it looked a little bit different because they were doing different things with the text box, the little band up at the top and the text box down at the bottom. So it is interesting to see the contrast in terms of how these cards came across. They also did their rookie standouts, and the rookie standouts are quite probably the best insert cards of this entire set. These are really good. These are a true full bleed. They basically kind of ghosted a little bit on the background to really enliven the player in terms of standing out within the context, but the cards look fantastic as a result, and they have a bunch of gold text which looks really good. You can't read the text. You cannot read it, which is fine. You need to turn the card over if you want to know who the player was. But other than that, the card fronts, they're very well balanced. They come across in a very rich, beautiful way. So I'm a big fan of these cards. The card backs are also kind of interesting because they basically ran the image of the player on the back into the text box. So it carries as a whole affair, and you can actually still kind of read the text. So it's a nice combination that they have. Unfortunately, the second year stars cards don't hold up anywhere near as well. So I just went from the best to pretty clearly the worst. And here they just have a thin little border around the outside. They have a big obnoxious logo. They have the gold text down at the bottom, which doesn't really fit with anything. Ironically, this card seems dated, and it seems dated from just 6 months earlier. That's how fast things were going, but it also shows how you really got to take care with how you do the design of the cards. So the borders on the GameDay cards were very, very well designed to work with the proportions and the feel that everything has. Here it was a very thin band that went around the whole card with no differentiation in terms of thickness. And because of that, it feels anemic. It feels almost like the card was miscut, like they cut it a little too wide. It doesn't read well, and that's too bad. The card back's a little bit better, but for the most part, this was definitely a low point. Now, if there was strong competition for the best card design, it would have to go with Rising Stars, which was, this is a cutout of the player against like a Starry Night or a space background, and the black of the background, it has the ability to really kind of enunciate the player. In some cases, the player can kind of disappear into it. That's the only weakness that it has, but it has a really deep, subdued, and very rich quality to it that reads really well. And on the card back, it uses a horizontal card back. This, again, it's very rare that they would do this, but they did do it in this card, and I wish that they'd done it more with these Tallboys, because it provides a lot of unique opportunity. Now, they had to be coming up with different inserts because they had the Series 2, and so the first insert set that was really kind of unique to Power Play was Global Greats. And this is basically a look at different stars who came from different countries in Northern Europe, and they did a theme of a flag in the back. Now, these are not the actual flags. This is a standard 3-color flag that used the different colors of each country. So instead of having the cross of Sweden or the cross of Finland, they basically just do the 3 colors, so you kind of get a feel for the difference that they have. But these are really nice looking cards. They're not interesting, but they look really good. It's an interesting combination that they have, and it's neat to see the different alignments of some of these players. It's something they would do every once in a while in hockey, but this is the way they really should have done it, where they really advertise the colors of each country, so that as you go through a set, you can really see the different countries stand out from the rest. So I like the card a lot, and on the card back, I really love how that same flag element worked with the text boxes on the top and on the bottom. I think it adds a unique richness, and I'm a big fan of these cards. They also came up with Netminders, and this is the first of the 2 insert sets where they actually used the exact same border as the main set. So in football, all 3 of the insert sets had used the exact same border. They just did it with a different color. And here they did the same thing, but instead of using a color, they used a pattern. So this was a marble that they used, and then there's kind of a turquoise color foil that they used for the text. And the combination of the 2, I think it really works beautifully. So I like how they did this. And on the card back, the marble also works really well. And then for points leaders, this is the big insert set that they did, and this is chock full of stars, but all these cards are a little bit more common, which kind of counters that. But here they did the same thing as they've done with Netminders, but in this case they did a gold theme, which is really yellow, but they did a gold theme, and then the background behind the player is also done with the same kind of yellowish hue. It makes the player stand out a little bit more, but it's too much yellow, unfortunately. It doesn't really work in the way that I'd like. They're nice cards, they're just not great cards. The last set that they did was Slapshot Artist. And here the card front they tried a trick where they superimposed an image of a player on another image of a player, and it kind of gets too lost because here there's just too much of one color and everything kind of blends together, which is unfortunate. I like the idea, I don't think it was executed. However, on the card back, I really love that because, again, the player's image is running in under the text boxes, and so that element works a lot better. The card back's not really where the value of a card should come from, but in this case, I think that the card back works a little bit better than the card front does. So that was basically what they did for Power Play. They didn't do any advertisements, nothing that is collectible. And they actually didn't even make a second year. They made one run at it, and for whatever reason, they never bothered to make a second year, which is too bad. So both hockey sets, both the old one and this new one, and also another one that would happen just following this, which was Parkhurst, they would only be one and dones, and that's too bad. I wish that hockey had had the opportunity to get a little bit more history, primarily because that's where the Tallboy started. But regardless, they did have a really good set here, so I'm glad that they at least got to do that. But following the hockey set, they launched into their 1994 year with a baseball set. This was extra bases. So here, the baseball set kind of kicked off their 94 theme for how they were going to design the cards. It is an ode to what they'd done in the 93-94 Jam Session basketball set, but still here, they really refined it. And the idea for 94 was it was going to be full bleed cards with just a little something down at the bottom. In the case of the baseball set, it was a gold band down at the bottom, not a gold foil. It was a gold, kind of a speckly, almost speckly quality element down at the bottom, and then the rest of it was basically just going to be the card flowing off. And if you're going to do a full bleed card, you've got to have good images, and they tended to get good images for the baseball set. That was kind of a problem in 94, was everybody got rid of the borders, but not very many people knew how to showcase the player. And for this baseball set, I think that for the most part, they did a really good job. So I think it reads really well. The card back, however, is a big problem because they did do a full bleed card on the card back again, and then they had a decent text box for the statistics. So you can actually read the statistics, but all the player vitals is yellow right on a picture, and so you really can't read it. And that's a shame, because the card front, I think, is fantastic. The card back is a big loss. But again, this was a problem that happened a lot in 1994, was people were trying to figure out how to make card backs, and this was a very big lesson of what not to do. They also did one promo for this set, and it's a shame that they just didn't do more promos, because in football and in basketball they did a ton of promos, so there's a ton of stuff to collect. Here in baseball they just did one card of Paul Molitor. It's basically a square sheet with the player on one side and it's a little info on the other side. That's basically it. It's pretty common, they're all over the place, and there's just no variety to it, which is kind of a letdown. But both hockey and baseball, it doesn't seem like they really cared to try to invest in it. And it could be that they were already seeing that in football there wasn't much longevity, so they were just kind of throwing these out to see how they might catch on, but they didn't really have the heart to pursue. But at any rate, that's all they did for that. Now, this is a single series set, and it has no subsets and nothing special with the checklist. It's just straightforward players, which is fine. It's a good set. But they did have their inserts. They had 4 inserts, and then they had a special release, which I'll get to in a second. So the inserts start off as you would expect with Gamebreaker. Now, this Gamebreaker card is a whole horizontal card, and I think this is the biggest insert set that had been done across the entire family of cards. These cards have a color box on one side with a player superimposed on top of that, and then the color box fades into a tighter shot of the player with normal background, and they have gold text down at the bottom. For some players, like with Ken Griffey Jr., the box is black, which makes these cards really rich and look great. Other ones have a brighter color, which doesn't work as well, but overall I think that these cards do look fantastic. On the card back, they have the color box with the text that fades into another shot of the player. It doesn't look quite as vibrant as the front, primarily because of shot selection, but still overall very nice. Then their rookie standouts cards are, this is something done very much for kids, and I'm not a fan with how it turned out. Basically, it is a complete shot. It's the player in the background, and then right around the player, it's almost like they made an aura around the player with this cutout, like he's being ripped right out of the image. I'm not sure what they were going for, but it's distracting. The card otherwise looks really good. It's very distracting with all the little detailing around the outside of the player. And then on the card back, it's a big white card back with a couple of little kitsch, very bright emblems on it that kind of distract. And so it doesn't, this card for me was entirely designed for kids, and it doesn't really hold up well for collectors. Now, for second year stars, this was a little bit different because here they really emphasized the verticality of the cards. So there's a very tight shot of the player on one side, and then a film strip showing not a sequence of shots, but some zooms in of the player as you go down the strip. It's a nice balance. The colors come across really well. I like how the card came across. And then I really like on the card back where they have, again, they did the same thing with the strip, this time at an angle with the text basically filling in the rest of the space. So it's a good combination of all these elements, and I think it came across really well. As far as Major League hopefuls go, I'm not sure how to take this card because it's a really bright card, and I really like the colors. It's bright orange on the top, down at the bottom it's kind of a reddish, computer-generated terrain with some color boxes of the player on the side, and so the colors are all rich, vibrant. This card really stands out. It looks good. It's just that you can't see the player in many cases. Because there's too much color, the player kind of gets lost, which is fine. I like the card. It's just it'd be nice to actually see the player. And on the card back, again, it's really bright and vibrant. So I'm not sure how to really take the set. But they also did a send away, and with send away, you got a complete set of what's called Pitcher's Duel, and this is 2 players opposite each other on the card front, horizontal front and back, so just like the Gamebreaker. But in this case, they have a great shot of a stadium, and the players are there. And what I find interesting is I'm drawn to the stadium. I love the stadium. I wish that they had done an entire insert set of all of the stadiums done this way. It would have been a great set. I'd love to see it. They could have done it up from the bleachers like this or down by the field. Either way, interior, exterior, they could have done a whole series of all 4 or 5 different shots of each stadium. I would have loved it. Every time I look at this card, I love the stadium, and I have to remind myself that there are actually some players superimposed in front of it, which is kind of a weird element to this card set. On the card back, it's a lot better. The players stand out a lot better, and there's a sepia shot of an old west town with some sky that is photoshopped in behind it. It's a nice combination. It looks good. Doesn't look great, but these cards it's kind of interesting because they tried something, and what they tried was better than what they actually had. So instead of making a card about these players, they made a card about the beautiful shot of a stadium, which is an interesting quirk that these cards have. But like with hockey, they didn't have a second run. This was it. There was a one and done. Extra bases was 1 year. Power play was 1 year. That was it. And even football didn't last past 1994. It was only basketball that was able to continue for a while. So this is all we got. And actually for baseball, this is literally all we got. They didn't make any other Tallboys for baseball. So in a way it does kind of make sense because baseball isn't as much of a vertical sport as the other sports are, but still, it is kind of weird that the baseball, nobody even tried it. So this is basically all they did for this brief time span. This is basically half a year that these were done in, and these were interesting cards that were done. I like the hockey set. I do like the baseball set. I think they both came across very well. I'm curious what they would have done in 1995, although I have to note, I saw what they did in Jam Session for the 95-96 set. It did not come out well. So they weren't going in the right direction, but they had all the pieces they needed to make a great set. So it is fun to look at these. And if you haven't checked these out, definitely take a chance to check them out. So again, I've done a video on the Tallboys. I've done one on GameDay, and I've done one on Jam Session. Check those out if you haven't had a chance. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Check out my other videos. And thank you very much for watching.